"Uncle, I got a feast today." Millionaire shocked to see this 4-year-old homeless girl eating a fried frog. 30 minutes later, he takes her to the most expensive restaurant in town and says something incredible. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scorching July sun beat down on downtown Harmony Creek when Ted Anthony parked his black Cadillac in front of the vacant lot on Elm Street. At 54, the businessman was used to the Ohio heat, but something about that afternoon made his heart clench in a different way. He adjusted his navy blue tie, ran his hand through his graying hair, and got out of the car, eager to check the location where he would build his new hardware store. His Italian loafers sank slightly into the red dirt as he walked across the lot, imagining where the structures of what would be the largest enterprise in the Anthony chain would be located. That's when a sudden movement caught his attention. In the far corner of the lot, near a small thicket, a thin smoke rose in spirals through the stifling air. Ted frowned and walked in that direction, thinking it might be a fire. What he found, however, made his blood run cold. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, was sitting on the ground with a stick in her hand. Her curly hair was dusty, and the pink dress she wore was so dirty that the original color was barely discernible. Beside her, a worn and torn teddy bear served as her only companion. "Uncle, I got a feast today," she exclaimed with an innocent smile, showing her small white teeth in contrast to her dirty face. Over a small fire improvised with twigs, she was roasting something that made Ted's stomach churn, a small frog. "Good heavens," Ted muttered, feeling his legs weaken. "Where are your parents, honey?" "Mommy's sleeping," the little one replied with frightening naturalness. "She hasn't woken up for days, even when I shout real loud." Her honey-colored eyes met Ted's without showing fear, only a resigned acceptance that no child should have. "What do you mean, sleeping, and your dad?" "Daddy left for Columbus a long time ago, said he'd come back rich," she shrugged, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "I'm Lily, and this is Freddie," she introduced, holding up the battered bear. Ted felt the world spinning. The girl's words hit him like a punch to the gut. Without thinking twice, he crouched down beside her. "Lily, can you take me to your mom?" The girl nodded, dropping the stick. "She's in our house." She pointed to a makeshift structure a few yards away, which Ted hadn't noticed before. A kind of tent made of pieces of tarpaulin and cardboard. "My name is Ted," he said softly, extending his hand. "Before we go see your mom, how about we eat something real? I know a place nearby with the best food in town." Lily's eyes lit up, but then she frowned. "I can't leave Mommy alone." "I promise. We'll be back soon to help her," Ted assured, feeling a lump in his throat. "Let's fill that tummy with real food first." Lily hesitated for a moment, hugging the bear tightly. "Can Freddie come too?" "Of course he can." Ted smiled, trying to disguise the anguish he felt. He must be hungry too. On the way to the car, Lily held his hand with a trust that frightened him. This girl shouldn't trust strangers so easily, he thought, but something about her awakened memories that he had been trying to bury deep in his mind for years. As he helped Lily into the back seat of the Cadillac, his cell phone vibrated. It was Irene, his wife. He ignored the call, knowing that she was probably demanding his presence for the anniversary trip they had been planning for months. But this girl needed him now. At Harmony Creek's most luxurious restaurant, well-dressed customers cast disapproving glances at the dirty girl who was devouring a plate of lasagna as if she had never seen real food in her life. Ted ignored them, focused on every detail that Lily shared between mouthfuls. "Mommy always says she's going to get better," she commented, wiping the sauce from the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand. "But then she started sleeping a lot. I tried to wake her up, but I can't." Ted's phone vibrated again. Irene again. He knew he needed to answer, but how to explain that his plans had changed completely in the last few minutes? How to say that, A girl who ate roasted frogs had turned his world upside down. "Lily," he said, holding the little girl's dirty hand, "I need you to trust me. We're going to help your mom, okay? But first, you need to show me where she is." The girl nodded, her honey-colored eyes fixed on his. At that moment, Ted made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he would not abandon that child, even if it meant sacrificing his own plans, even if it cost him his marriage, even if he lost everything he had built. Because something in that innocent and at the same time so suffering look reminded him of a pain he had carried for years, a wound that had never healed completely. What Ted didn't know was that that decision would be just the beginning of a journey that would change not only Lily's life, but his own, in ways he could never imagine. And that the price to pay for this choice would be much greater than he was prepared to face. Ted's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Lily back to the vacant lot. The afternoon sun began to hide behind the buildings in downtown Harmony Creek, casting elongated shadows on the red dirt. The girl walked resolutely, still holding Freddie, the battered teddy bear, against her chest. In her other small, dirty hand, she carefully kept a piece of lasagna wrapped in a napkin. "For Mommy when she wakes up," she had explained. As they approached the makeshift tent, a strong, unpleasant smell made Ted instinctively cover his nose. The house, as Lily called it, was nothing more than a few pieces of tarpaulin tied precariously to wooden stakes, with cardboard serving as a floor. It was hard to believe that someone could live in those conditions in the heart of a prosperous town like Harmony Creek. "Mommy, I brought a visitor," Lily announced cheerfully, pulling aside a piece of tarpaulin that served as a door. What Ted saw when he entered the tent made his stomach churn. Lying on some old blankets was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 27 years old. Her skin was pale and dry, her lips cracked, and a thin layer of sweat covered her forehead. Even in the stifling environment, she didn't move with their arrival. "Naomi, Mrs. Naomi," Ted called, crouching beside her. There was no answer. Her pulse was weak, her breathing shallow. "Good Lord, how long has she been like this, Lily?" "For many days," the girl replied, sitting beside her mother and stroking her hair with a tenderness that broke Ted's heart. "But she always wakes up a little to drink water. But she hasn't woken up today." Ted didn't waste any time. He took out his cell phone and called an ambulance, giving the coordinates of the lot. While they waited, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Irene was becoming more and more insistent. On the 10th ring, he finally answered. "Ted Anthony, where are you? Our flight leaves in 2 hours." Irene's voice was full of irritation. "The airport. Staff has already called twice confirming our check-in." "Irene, listen to me." He tried to keep his voice calm, moving a few steps away from the tent. "There's an emergency. I won't be able to travel today." "What do you mean you can't travel? It's our anniversary, Ted. We've been planning this trip for months." I know, but there's a serious problem at the company that I need to resolve personally," he lied, hating himself for it. How to explain the real situation to Irene? She would never understand. "Problem at the company. Since when can't you solve things over the phone? You're lying to me, Ted. What's going on?" At that moment, the sound of the ambulance siren cut through the hot afternoon air. Irene must have heard it on the phone because her voice changed from irritated to worried. "That's a siren? Ted, are you okay? Did something happen?" "I'll explain everything later, I promise. I need to hang up now." The paramedics arrived quickly, and the scene that followed was chaotic. Lily clung to Ted's legs, frightened by the men in uniform who were examining her mother. When they tried to put Naomi on the stretcher, the girl began to cry. "Easy, little one." Ted picked her up, surprised at how light she was. "They're going to help your mom. Let's go to the hospital together, okay?" On the way to the hospital, sitting in the back seat of his Cadillac and following the ambulance, Ted watched Lily in the rearview mirror. The girl had fallen asleep, exhausted, still clinging to the teddy bear. His phone vibrated again, but this time it wasn't Irene. It was Frank, his accountant. "Boss, sorry to call at this hour, but I need to talk to you urgently." Frank's voice was tense. "Those investments we made in the new commercial complex. We've had a serious problem." Ted felt a chill in his stomach. "What kind of problem, Frank?" "The kind that could lead us to bankruptcy in 3 months if we don't act fast," Frank replied, his voice trembling slightly. "The documents that arrived today, well, you better see them in person. I need your signature on some papers today, or we could lose everything." The businessman closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. His company, built over decades of hard work, was at risk. His marriage would likely be in crisis after the cancellation of the trip. And now he had in his hands the responsibility for a child and her sick mother. At the hospital, the hours dragged on in the waiting room. Lily had woken up and was now playing silently with Freddie in one of the chairs, while Ted paced back and forth, alternating between tense calls with Frank and increasingly cold text messages from Irene. When the doctor finally appeared, his face was grave. "Mr. Anthony, Mrs. Naomi is severely malnourished and dehydrated. She also shows signs of severe anemia and possible depression. She will need to be hospitalized for a while." "And the girl?" Ted asked, looking at Lily. "She can't stay alone." "We have already contacted Child Protective Services," the doctor informed him. "They should be arriving soon to take the child to a temporary shelter." The words hit Ted like a punch to the gut. A shelter? That little one had already suffered so much. He looked at Lily, who was now watching him with her big, honey-colored eyes, as if she understood that something important was being decided. "Isn't there another option?" he asked, his voice betraying his concern. "Unfortunately not, sir. These are the legal procedures in these cases." At that moment, Ted made another decision that would change his life. He picked up the phone and called Jim, his longtime lawyer friend. "Jim, I need your urgent help. I'm at the town hospital and I need you to come here now. I'm going to need documents, anything that allows me to be temporarily responsible for a child." "Ted, have you gone crazy?" Jim's voice sounded worried. "It's not that simple. There's a whole legal process." "I don't care. Make it happen. I'll pay whatever it takes, but I can't let this girl go to a shelter." While waiting for Jim, Ted sat down next to Lily. The girl rested her head on his arm, as if that gesture were the most natural thing in the world. "Uncle Ted," she murmured, sleepily, "is Mommy going to be okay?" "Yes, she is, little one," he replied, feeling a lump in his throat. "And I promise I'll take care of you both." The cell phone vibrated once again. It was a message from Irene. "Since you chose your work over our marriage, I think it's best not to come home today." Ted looked at the message, then at Lily, and then at the hallway where his life was about to change completely. What would Irene say when she found out the truth? How would he save his company from bankruptcy? And more importantly, how would he protect that little girl who, in a matter of hours, had become so important in his life? Night fell over Harmony Creek, and Ted Anthony knew that nothing in his life would be the same. What he didn't know was that his problems were just beginning, and that the price for his decisions would be much greater than he could imagine. The morning arrived with a stifling heat in Harmony Creek. Ted woke up in the uncomfortable armchair, in the hospital waiting room, his neck sore and his tie loose. Lily was sleeping, curled up in 2 chairs put together, using his jacket as a blanket, Freddie firmly hugged against her chest. The last 24 hours seemed like a confusing blur in his mind. Jim had managed to get a temporary authorization from the judge to allow Lily to remain under Ted's responsibility while her mother was hospitalized. But the final process would be more complicated. "Do you realize the mess you're getting into?" the lawyer had asked, adjusting his glasses on his wrinkled 65-year-old face. Ted's phone vibrated for the 1,000th time. Another message from Irene. He didn't need to open it to know the content. Since the night before, she had been alternating between furious accusations and worried questions. He knew he needed to tell the truth, but how to explain something that he himself didn't fully understand? "Mr. Anthony," a nurse approached silently. "Mrs. Naomi has woken up and is asking for her daughter." Ted felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He looked at Lily, still asleep, and decided to talk to Naomi alone first. He needed to better understand the situation. In the hospital room, Naomi was sitting on the bed, her sunken eyes marked by deep, dark circles, contrasting with the paleness of her young face. Seeing Ted, she visibly tensed. "Who are you? Where is my daughter?" Her voice came out hoarse and scared. "My name is Ted Anthony," he replied softly, keeping his distance so as not to alarm her even more. "Your daughter is fine, sleeping in the waiting room. I found you yesterday in the lot on Elm Street." Tears began to stream down Naomi's face, even before Ted finished speaking. "Forgive me," she sobbed, hiding her face in her hands. "Forgive me for being such a bad mother. I tried. I swear I tried. No one is judging you." Ted pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. "I want to help you, but I need to understand how you got into this situation." Between sobs, Naomi began to tell her story. She had met Junior 5 years earlier when he was working as a bricklayer in Harmony Creek. The courtship was quick and intense, and soon she was pregnant. In the early years, they lived modestly but happily. Junior was a good father, even with the little he earned. But then he started dreaming of a better life. Naomi wiped away her tears with the edge of the sheet. "He said there was a lot of work in Columbus, that he was going to get rich. He promised to come back in a few months to get us." "And you never heard from him again?" "He called a few times at first, sent some money, then he stopped. The cell phone just went to voicemail." She closed her eyes, reliving the pain. "I worked as a cleaner. I managed to support Lily until I got sick. At first, I thought it was just tiredness, but it got worse. I couldn't work properly anymore. People stopped calling me. The money ran out. We lost the apartment." Her voice trailed off. "I'm sorry, I can't talk anymore." Ted was about to answer when his cell phone vibrated again. It was Frank, his accountant. "Boss, critical situation. Emergency meeting with investors in 1 hour. Without your presence, we'll lose everything." At that moment, Lily appeared in the doorway of the room, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Seeing her mother awake, her face lit up. "Mommy!" She ran to hug her. The businessman watched the scene with a heavy heart. His business empire was crumbling, his marriage in tatters, but something about that girl and her mother awakened feelings in him that had been dormant for a long time. "Naomi," he said, making a decision, "I'm going to be direct. I want to help you. I have a small furnished studio apartment downtown. I used it for trainees. You can stay there while you recover. And when you're better, I have an administrative assistant position at my company." Naomi's eyes widened. "But why? You don't even know us." Before Ted could answer, an imposing figure appeared in the doorway of the room. Irene, his wife, dressed elegantly as always, but with an expression that mixed fury and disbelief. "So this is it?" she said, her voice cutting like a razor. "Is this why you cancelled our trip, to play savior to strangers? Irene, it's not what you're thinking." "No? Then explain it to me, Ted. Explain why my husband, who has never cared about charity, is suddenly offering a house and a job to... She gestured towards Naomi and Lily without finishing the sentence. Lily shrank against her mother, frightened by the sudden tension. Ted felt his cell phone vibrate once again. Frank again. 40 minutes to the meeting. It's our last chance. "Ma'am," Naomi tried to speak, her voice weak. "We don't want to cause any problems." "Too late," Irene snapped, turning to leave. At the door, she cast one last icy look at her husband. "When you decide to explain what's going on, I'll be at my sister's house." The silence that followed was deafening. Ted looked at his watch. 35 minutes to try and save his company. He looked at Lily and Naomi, two lives that, inexplicably, had become intertwined with his. "I need to take care of an emergency," he said finally, "but I'll be back later. And I stand by what I said. The studio apartment and the job are yours, no strings attached." Leaving the hospital, Ted didn't notice the man watching him from across the street, talking on his cell phone. "He's leaving now, Carl. And you're not going to believe what I found out about our friend Ted Anthony." In the car, on the way to the meeting that could decide the future of his company, Ted was hit by a wave of memories that he had been trying to suppress for years. The way Lily held that battered teddy bear, her way of speaking, even the tone of her honey-colored eyes, it all painfully reminded him of his Mary, but he couldn't think about that now, not when he was about to lose everything he had built. What Ted didn't know was that his problems were just beginning, and that his decisions of the last 24 hours would trigger a series of events that would forever change not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. At the hospital reception, the man watching him typed a message, confirming the suspicion. "The girl is identical to his missing daughter. Ted Anthony has finally shown his weakness." The reply arrived seconds later. "Great, keep monitoring. He'll soon pay for everything he's done." The mirrored building of Anthony Construction reflected the harsh Harmony Creek sun when Ted parked his Cadillac in the president's spot. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his crumpled tie. It was 9:47 a.m., and he had exactly 13 minutes to try and save the work of a lifetime. In the elevator, he tried to organize his thoughts. The last 24 hours seemed like a surreal nightmare. The girl in the vacant lot, the sick mother, Irene furious, and now the possible bankruptcy of his company. His cell phone wouldn't stop vibrating with messages from Frank, each one more desperate than the last. Arriving on the 10th floor, his secretary, Mrs. Betty, a 63-year-old woman who had worked with him for 2 decades, greeted him with wide eyes of concern. "Dr. Anthony, thank goodness. Mr. Frank is about to have a stroke, and the investors are all in the meeting room." "How is the situation, Betty?" "Bad." She lowered her voice. "Mr. Carl is also there." Ted felt his blood run cold. Carl Manning, his biggest rival in the construction business in Ohio, shouldn't be at that meeting. Something was very wrong. Entering the meeting room, the heavy air of tension almost suffocated him. Seated at the large mahogany table were the 5 largest investors in his new project, all with grave expressions. And there was Carl, an almost imperceptible smile playing on his thin lips. "Ted, my friend." Carl stood up, extending his hand with false cordiality. At 45, he was known for his business acumen and for having no scruples to get what he wanted. "Good that you could join us, despite your personal commitments." The ironic tone didn't go unnoticed. Ted shook the offered hand, feeling dirty just touching that man. Frank, sitting in a corner of the room, seemed to have aged 10 years since the last time he had seen him. "Gentlemen," Ted began, trying to maintain his composure, "I apologize for the delay. I had a family emergency." "Family emergency," interrupted Vince Carter, one of the oldest investors. "Is that what you call abandoning an anniversary trip to get involved with beggars?" Ted felt his face burn. How did they know? His eyes met those of Carl, who maintained that irritating smile. "News travels fast in Harmony Creek," Carl commented, casually, "especially when it involves one of the most respected businessmen in town being seen with, well, how can I say, less fortunate people." "My personal life is not under discussion here," Ted replied dryly. "We came to talk about the investments in the new commercial complex." Ah, yes, the complex. Carl flipped through some papers in front of him. It's interesting how the numbers don't add up, isn't it? Frank, why don't you explain to your boss what we discovered? The accountant stood up with difficulty, sweat dripping down his forehead. Boss, I'm sorry. What's going on here? Ted demanded, a knot forming in his stomach. What's going on? Vince took the floor. Is that your accountant here has been making some questionable investments with our money. Investments that curiously benefited shell companies linked to Mr. Carl. The revelation hit Ted like a punch. He looked at Frank, who was now crying silently, then at Carl, who continued with that unbearable smile. That's impossible, Ted murmured. Frank would never... Oh, but he did, Carl interrupted, his voice dripping with satisfaction. And you know the best part? All perfectly documented. Your so trustworthy accountant diverted millions to my companies in recent months. Of course, he didn't know they were mine. He thought he was doing business with independent businessmen. The room began to spin. Ted needed to lean on the table to avoid falling. Years of work, his entire reputation, everything was crumbling in a matter of minutes. But there's a solution, Carl continued, standing up slowly. I can buy your stake in the venture. I'll assume your debts, keep your employees, well, most of them, and you get out of this story with some dignity. Why are you doing this? Ted asked, his voice almost a whisper. Carl's smile finally disappeared, giving way to an expression of pure contempt. Because it's finally time for you to pay for everything, Ted Anthony. Did you really think I had forgotten? Before Ted could answer, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from the hospital. Lily had a high fever, and Naomi was desperately asking for his presence. Gentlemen, Carl addressed the investors, why don't we give our friend Ted a few hours to think? After all, he has more urgent matters to resolve now, doesn't he? The tone of veiled threat in Carl's voice made Ted freeze. How did he know about Lily? What else did he know? Leaving the meeting room, Ted was approached by Frank in the hallway. Boss, forgive me, the accountant sobbed. He caught me in an old fraud. Said he was going to report everything if I didn't cooperate. How much? Ted asked, his voice cold as ice. How much of my company did you hand over to him? 70% of the investments, Frank replied, defeated. But there's one more thing. He asked a lot about your missing daughter, about Mary. The name hit Ted like lightning. In his pocket, the cell phone vibrated again. Another message from the hospital, more urgent, and then a message from an unknown number. Little Lily is very similar to Mary, don't you think? It would be a shame if something happened to her, too. In the parking lot, Ted found his car with its tires slashed. On the body, scratched with something sharp, a message. This time you won't be able to save anyone. His hands were shaking so much that he could barely grab his cell phone to call a cab. He needed to get to the hospital. He needed to protect Lily and Naomi. But how would he do that, now that he was about to lose everything? The taxi sped through the streets of Harmony Creek, and Ted tried to organize his thoughts amid the chaos. How did Carl know about Mary? What was the connection between his daughter's disappearance and the current events? And why that specific threat about Lily? In the back seat of the taxi, Ted finally allowed the tears to stream down his face. They weren't tears of sadness or defeat. They were tears of anger, because now he was beginning to understand. The meeting with Lily had not been a coincidence. None of this was a coincidence. What Ted didn't know was that at that very moment someone else was watching his movements. In the building across from Anthony Construction, a man was talking. On his cell phone. He's going to the hospital. Do you want me to follow him? On the other end of the line, a familiar voice replied, No, let him go. He'll soon find out that some nightmares from the past never really end. The hospital corridors seemed endless as Ted ran towards Naomi's room. His heart pounded in his chest, not only from the running, but from the fear of what he might find. The words scratched on his car still echoed in his mind. This time, you won't be able to save anyone. Turning down the third-floor corridor, he almost collided with Jim, who was leaving room 304 with a worried expression on his wrinkled face. The old lawyer held Ted by the shoulders, preventing him from immediately entering the room. "Calm and down, my friend," Jim spoke in a low voice. "The girl is fine now. The fever broke a few minutes ago." "What happened? Why did Lily have a fever so suddenly?" Jim adjusted his glasses on his face, a habit that Ted knew well. It was his way of buying time before giving bad news. "The food, Ted. Someone brought her a snack while you were gone. The nurse said it was from you." Ted's blood ran cold. "I didn't send anything." "I figured," Jim sighed. "Luckily, Lily only took one bite. It tasted strange," she said. "But it was enough to cause food poisoning." Ted needed to lean against the wall to avoid falling. First the slashed tires, now this. It wasn't paranoia. Someone was really trying to get to him through Lily. "Where's Naomi?" "Sleeping. The doctors gave her a sedative after she became hysterical with the girl's fever." Jim lowered his voice even further. "But there's one more. A thing. While you were gone, a man tried to enter the room. He said he was a social worker, but when they asked for documentation, he disappeared." Before Ted could answer, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Irene. "We need to talk. Now it's about Mary." "Jim," Ted grabbed his friend's arm tightly, "I need you to stay here. Don't let anyone enter that room besides the medical staff. No one." "What's going on, Ted? Are you in trouble?" "I don't know anymore," he replied honestly. "But I think I'm finally going to find out what happened to my daughter." On the way to Regina's apartment, Irene's sister Ted tried to piece together the puzzle in his mind. Mary's disappearance 7 years ago had destroyed his marriage. He and Irene stayed together, but they were like two strangers living under the same roof, united only by the pain of loss. The apartment was in a luxurious condominium in downtown Harmony Creek. When Ted rang the doorbell, it was Regina who answered. At 52, she was the more austere version of Irene, with the same green eyes but without any trace of softness. "She's on the balcony," Regina said dryly. "And Ted, whatever you've discovered, try not to upset her more than she already is." Irene was sitting in a wicker armchair, staring at the city below. She didn't turn around when Ted approached. "Why didn't you tell me about the girl?" she asked, her voice full of grief. "Why did you hide that you found a child just like our Mary?" "She's not like her, Irene. She's just a coincidence?" She finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red from crying so much. A 6-year-old girl with curly hair and honey-colored eyes appears out of nowhere on the same lot where... She didn't complete the sentence, but she didn't need to. That vacant lot where Ted found Lily was less than 2 blocks from where Mary had disappeared 7 years before. "I received a call today," Irene continued, her hands trembling as she held a brown envelope. "A distorted voice saying that I needed to see some pictures. The delivery guy left this an hour ago." Ted took the envelope carefully. Inside were several old photographs. Mary playing in the park, Mary at school, Mary on Carl Manning's lap during a company Christmas party. "That son of a bitch," Ted muttered, his hands shaking with anger. He knew. All this time, he knew. "There's more." Irene took a folded paper from her pocket. "It's an old news report about a car accident in Columbus. The driver fled, but they found an Anthony construction pin at the scene." "What accident?" "The car where Junior, Lily's father, was a year ago. He survived, but was in a coma for months. When he woke up, he didn't remember anything." Ted felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. "How did you find out about this?" "The person who called told me. Said that if I wanted to know more about our daughter's disappearance, I should ask your great rival about the night of March 15th, 7 years ago." Ted's cell phone vibrated again. It was another message from the unknown number. Your little girl is sleeping so peacefully in the hospital. It would be a shame if she had the same fate as Mary, wouldn't it? Irene, Ted barely recognized his own voice. I need you to come with me now. I think I know who took our daughter, and I think he's going to try and do the same thing to Lily. In Regina's car, borrowed in a hurry, Ted told Irene everything. The meeting with the investors, Frank's betrayal, Carl's threats, the attempted poisoning of Lily. But why? Irene asked, tears streaming down her face. Why would Carl do this? Because 7 years ago, I discovered something about him, something that could destroy him. But before I could do anything, Mary disappeared, Irene completed, finally understanding. When they arrived at the hospital, they found room 304 empty. Jim was lying near the door, a bump growing on his forehead. 2 men, he muttered, trying to get up, said they were police, officers, had documents, took Lily and Naomi. Ted helped his friend to sit down, his heart threatening to explode in his chest. His cell phone vibrated one last time. Go to the old St. Joseph Pottery Warehouse, alone. If you bring anyone, they both have the same fate as Mary. Ted, no! Irene grabbed his arm when he turned to leave. It's a trap! I know, he replied, kissing her forehead for the first time in years. But this time, it's going to be different. This time I'm going to find out the truth, and I'm going to bring our girl back. What Ted didn't know was that at that very moment, another drama was unfolding in the old warehouse. Naomi, tied to a chair, looked in horror at the man who had just entered, a face she hadn't seen in over a year, but that she could never forget. Junior, she whispered, barely believing her eyes. How? Why? The man who was once her husband didn't answer. He just stood there, standing in the shadows, while silent tears streamed down his scarred face. In his arms, Lily slept deeply, sedated by the pills dissolved in the juice they had given her at the hospital. In the shadow behind him, Carl Manning smiled. His revenge plan was finally coming to an end. In a few hours, Ted Anthony would discover that some secrets are capable of destroying much more than just one family. They are capable of destroying entire lives. The sun was beginning to set when Ted parked his car a block away from the old St. Joseph Pottery. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the orange sky like a shadow of Harmony Creek's industrial past, its peeling walls telling stories of glory and decay. For a moment, he was paralyzed behind the wheel, remembering the last time he had been there 7 years ago, when he was still partners with Carl. His cell phone vibrated. It was Jim, already recovered from the blow he had taken. The police are on their way, but they'll be a while. Don't do anything reckless. Ted looked at the message and turned off the device. He couldn't risk it, not this time. Approaching the warehouse, his legs trembled, but not from fear. It was anger, an anger that had been growing for 7 years, since Mary disappeared. Now, all the pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a macabre puzzle that he should have realized sooner. The side door of the warehouse was ajar, like a grim invitation. Inside, the smell of mold and abandonment mixed with something familiar, the same expensive cologne that Carl always wore. Shadows danced on the walls, projected by the faint light that entered through the broken windows. Welcome to the place. Where it all began, Ted, Carl's voice echoed through the empty space. He was standing in the middle of the warehouse, next to an old production line. At his feet, Naomi was tied to a chair, gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Lily was nowhere in sight. Where's the girl? Ted asked, his voice trembling with contained fury. Ah, your new protégé. Carl smiled, that smile that Ted hated so much. She's safe for now, with someone you'll also want to see very much. A door opened at the back of the warehouse. Junior entered, carrying the sleeping Lily in his arms. His face was marked by scars that weren't there a year ago, and his eyes had a distant, almost feverish gleam. Junior? Ted murmured, confused. But The accident in Columbus. It wasn't exactly an accident, was it? Carl interfered, his voice full of satisfaction. Tell him, Junior. Tell him how you woke up from the coma without memory, and how I gently helped you recover it. Well, at least the part that interested me. Naomi struggled in the chair, tears streaming down her face as she saw her ex-husband. Junior avoided looking at her, keeping his eyes fixed on some distant point. You know, Ted, Carl continued, walking slowly through the warehouse, you always thought you were so smart. The great honest businessman of Harmony Creek, the philanthropist, the man who built an empire with hard work. But you never realized that your perfect world was built on the ruins of mine. What are you talking about? I'm talking about that bid 7 years ago, the one you won by presenting evidence that my company was defrauding contracts, evidence that destroyed my reputation, that made me lose everything I had built. Ted felt a chill run down his spine. You were stealing public money, Carl. I only did what was right. What was right? Carl laughed bitterly. You destroyed my life, but then I discovered your weak spot, your precious Mary. The name of his daughter in Carl's mouth made Ted take a step forward, but he stopped when he saw the other make a threatening gesture towards Lily. It was so easy, Carl continued. A trusting child who knew everyone in the company, who wasn't. Afraid to get into Uncle Carl's car when he offered to take her for ice cream after school. You monster! Ted lunged forward, but Junior quickly placed Lily on an old table and pulled something from his pocket, a syringe. One more step, and she gets a dose that no child would survive, Carl threatened. Now, let me finish my story. You need to understand why you're here. Ted froze, his heart threatening to explode in his chest. Naomi sobbed silently in the chair, her eyes alternating between her unconscious daughter and the ex-husband she no longer recognized. After your daughter disappeared, Carl continued, it was beautiful to see your world crumble. Your marriage ended, even if you and Irene continued to live together. Your company started to fail because you couldn't concentrate anymore. And the best part, you never suspected me. You were too busy blaming yourself. Where is she? Ted asked, his voice almost a whisper. Mary. Ah, she's fine. Very well, in fact. She grew up beautiful, you know. She's with a wonderful family in another state. A family that doesn't know who she really is, of course. I could have done worse, but I wanted you to suffer knowing that she was alive somewhere, but that you would never see her again. Each word was like a knife in Ted's heart. 7 years of anguish, of not knowing if his daughter was alive or dead, and now this. And then, Carl continued, you had to come up with this redemption story. The great Ted Anthony saving a mother and daughter from misery. I couldn't resist. It was the perfect opportunity to finish what I started. What do you mean? Junior here, Carl pointed to the man with the syringe, worked for me after the accident. Of course, he didn't know that until he recovered his memory. I found him in Columbus, disoriented, not even remembering his own name. It was so easy to manipulate him. Junior shuddered, as if each word hurt him physically. His hand holding the syringe trembled slightly. And now, Carl smiled, you're going to sign some documents. Total transfer of your company to me. No questions asked, no investigations. In exchange, your 2 protégés leave here safely, and as a bonus, I'll tell you where to find Mary. Don't believe him, Ted, a female voice cut through the air. Everyone turned. Irene was standing at the entrance to the warehouse, panting. He's lying about Mary. Irene, no! Ted shouted, but it was too late. What happened next was like a scene in slow motion. Carl pulled out a gun, pointing it at Irene. Junior, in a moment of lucidity, dropped the syringe and ran to protect Lily. Naomi managed to break free. The ropes that tied her had been partially cut by someone. And then a child's voice cut through the chaos. Daddy! Lily had woken up, her honey-colored eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't Junior that she was looking at. Her gaze was fixed on something behind Ted, something that made Carl lose all the color in his face. At the entrance to the warehouse, besides Irene, there was someone else, a figure that made time stop, that made the whole world spin in slow motion. Ted turned slowly, his heart almost stopping as he recognized that face he hadn't seen in so long. But before he could process what he was seeing, a deafening noise filled the warehouse. Glass shattered, shadows moved, and screams echoed through the old walls. In the midst of the chaos, Ted could only think of one thing. This time, he wouldn't lose anyone. This time, he would fight with all his strength to protect everyone he loved. What he didn't know was that the real nightmare was just beginning, and that the darkest secrets were yet to come. The broken glass was still tinkling on the warehouse floor when a figure emerged from the dust and confusion. Jim, accompanied by Mrs. Betty. Ted's secretary firmly held a folder of documents in her wrinkled hands, her normally gentle face contorted into an expression of fierce determination. "It's over, Carl." Jim's voice thundered through the space. "We have everything, absolutely everything." Carl, still wielding the gun, took a few steps back. His eyes darted from side to side like a cornered animal. "What are you talking about, old man?" "I'm talking about this." Mrs. Betty stepped forward, her voice trembling not with fear, but with contained anger. She opened the folder and began spreading documents across the dusty floor. "Your secret account in the Cayman Islands, the bribery records, and this." She held up a specific sheet, making Carl pale even further. "The registration of the car you used to chase Junior in Columbus, the same car that was seen on the day of Mary's disappearance." "Impossible," Carl murmured. "That information was in my personal safe." "Did you forget who has been cleaning your office for 20 years? Mrs. Betty smiled, a cold smile that no one had ever seen on her kind face. "Who serves your coffee every morning? Who saw you destroy my boy Ted's life?" At that moment, Junior staggered, his hands squeezing his head as if he felt intense pain. I remember," he murmured. "The black car, following me in Columbus. You said you would hurt my family if I didn't." "Shut up!" Carl shouted, turning the gun towards Junior. But before he could do anything, a small figure threw herself against his legs, unbalancing him. It was Lily. The girl who everyone thought was sleeping had taken advantage of the confusion to slip off the table. Her honey-colored eyes sparkled with a courage that shouldn't exist in someone so small. "Don't hurt my dad," she shouted, clinging to Carl's legs. The moment of distraction was all Ted needed. In 2 steps, he reached Carl, knocking the gun out of his hand. The two men rolled across the warehouse floor, years of hatred and resentment, exploding in punches and blows. "Enough!" A female voice cut through the air, making everyone freeze. It was Naomi. She had managed to completely free herself from the ropes and was now standing, trembling but determined. Beside her was Irene, and between the two... "It can't be," Ted whispered, feeling the world spin. A girl of approximately 13 years old, curly brown hair and frightened eyes, looked at the scene with a mixture of fear and recognition. "Dad," she murmured. "Mary?" Ted felt his legs weaken. "But how?" "I found her," Irene explained, tears streaming down her face. "After I received those photos, I started investigating on my own. Mrs. Betty helped me. She was in a boarding school in Ohio all this time." "No!" Carl tried to get up, but Jim and Junior held him down. "You're lying. I sent her away to another state." "You sent a random child," Mrs. Betty revealed, "to make us believe that Mary was far away, but I always suspected it. You didn't realize, but I copied all your documents over the years, including the boarding school records where you hid her." Mary took a hesitant step towards Ted, who remained paralyzed. "He said you didn't want me anymore," she said, her voice small, that you had another family now." "Never!" Ted exclaimed, tears streaming freely down his face. "There wasn't a single day when we didn't think about you, that we weren't looking for you." Lily, who was watching everything with wide eyes, approached Mary. "You're the girl in the picture," she said simply. "The one Uncle Ted looks at every night on his cell phone, crying." The innocent comment broke the last barrier. Ted crossed the space between them in 2 steps and hugged Mary, sobbing. Irene joined the hug, and for a moment time stopped in the old warehouse. But reality soon intervened. Junior staggered again, his memory returning in painful flashes. Carl found me after the accident, said he had proof that I had caused someone's death in the crash, made me work for him, spy on Ted. I didn't. Remember my own family. Naomi ran to support Junior before he fell. Despite everything, there was still love in her eyes when she looked at her ex-husband. "You didn't have a choice," she murmured. "He manipulated us all." "You don't understand," Carl shouted, struggling. "He destroyed my life first, destroyed everything I built." "No, Carl." Mrs. Betty approached, her voice full of contempt. "You destroyed yourself. With your greed, your wickedness, I saw everything. I saw how you diverted money from construction projects, how you overbilled contracts. And I have all the evidence," Jim completed. "Every document, every transaction, including about what you did to Mary, to Junior, and your attempts to hurt Lily." At that moment, sirens began to sound in the distance, approaching. Carl seemed to wither, all his arrogance finally fading away. Lily, still watching everything, approached Ted and Mary. "So, you're my sister now?" she asked, her innocence cutting through the tension in the air. Mary looked at the little one, then at her father, then at Irene. Years of loneliness and fear were beginning to melt in her gaze. "I think so," she replied hesitantly. "Honey," Ted held Mary's hand, "you don't have to decide anything now. We have all the time in the world to reconnect, to heal the wounds." "I never forgot," Mary whispered. "Even when he said you didn't love me anymore, I never forgot your hug, Dad. The smell of Mom's perfume." Irene sobbed, hugging her daughter again. Naomi and Junior watched the scene, their own wounds beginning to heal in the warmth of that moment. The sirens were closer now. Jim began to organize the documents, preparing to explain everything to the authorities. Mrs. Betty smiled, finally allowing a few tears to escape. "You know," she said to no one in particular, "sometimes God writes straight with crooked lines. Who would have thought that a little girl roasting a frog in a vacant lot would be the beginning of the end of so much suffering?" Lily, hearing this, smiled proudly. "I didn't have to eat the frog, you know. Uncle Ted gave me lasagna." The laughter that followed was like music, breaking years of pain and heartache. But as the authorities arrived and Carl was finally taken away to face the consequences of his actions, Ted knew that the journey wasn't over. There was much to rebuild, much to heal. The sun had already set completely, but for the first time in 7 years, the darkness didn't seem so scary, because now, finally, all the pieces were beginning to fit together, and a new story was about to begin. Dawn in Harmony Creek arrived with a gentleness that seemed almost ironic after the tumultuous night. At the hospital, where everyone had gone after the events at the warehouse, room 304 was unrecognizably crowded. Naomi had been readmitted for observation, more because of the emotional stress than physical issues. Beside her in the hospital bed, Lily slept soundly, still clinging to the inseparable Freddie. Junior was sitting in a chair in the corner, with a nurse changing the bandage on his forehead. The headache that had struck him in the warehouse had been so strong that he fainted on the way to the hospital. Doctors suspected that the sudden return of memories had caused an overload on his nervous system. Across the room, Ted couldn't take his eyes off Mary, as if he feared she might disappear again if he blinked. The girl, now a 13-year-old teenager, was curled up in an armchair, occasionally casting shy glances at her parents. Irene sat on the arm of the armchair, gently stroking her daughter's hair, a gesture she had dreamed of doing for 7 long years. "You need to rest," Jim spoke from the door, where he stood with Mrs. Betty. "It was a long night for everyone." "I can't sleep," Mary murmured, her first sentence in hours. "I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out this is just a dream." Ted felt his heart clench. He approached his daughter, kneeling beside her. "It's not a dream, my little one. We're here, and we'll never be separated again." "He said," Mary began, her voice trembling, "Carl said that you had abandoned me, that you didn't want me anymore. At first I didn't believe it, but after so long—" "Look at me." Irene held her daughter's face gently. "There wasn't a single day that we didn't think about you, that we didn't look for you. Your father almost went crazy. Her voice failed, and Mary hugged her instinctively. It was a different hug now, no longer from a small child, but from a teenager who had grown up far from her parents, carrying deep wounds. "How did you find out the truth?" Ted asked Mrs. Betty, who was still firmly holding the folder with the evidence against Carl. The lady sighed, sitting down in a nearby chair. "I always suspected him. In the first years after Mary's disappearance, I noticed how he seemed satisfied, and then I started paying more attention. Copied documents when I cleaned his office, noted suspicious conversations. Why didn't you tell me? Because he was always watching. He had people everywhere, infiltrated even in your company. If I said anything, he would know, and then we wouldn't be able to gather enough evidence." At that moment, Lily stirred in the bed, her honey-colored eyes opening slowly. Seeing so many people in the room, she sat up, startled. "Easy, my love." Naomi hugged her. "Everything is okay now." "Mommy," Lily whispered, "I dreamed that Daddy had come back." Junior stood up with difficulty from his chair, approaching the bed. His eyes were teary. "It wasn't a dream, honey. I'm back. Forgive me for being away for so long." Lily looked at him for a long moment, then at Naomi, as if asking for permission. When her mother nodded gently, the girl stretched out her arms to her father. The hug between father and daughter made everyone in the room wipe away discreet tears. Even Jim, always so restrained, had to take off his glasses to clean his eyes. "You also have a dad who came back," Lily said suddenly, looking at Mary. "Just like me." The simplicity of the child's observation broke the tension in the room. Mary, for the first time, smiled. A small, hesitant, but real smile. "Yeah, just like you," she replied softly. "Mr. Anthony," Junior spoke, still hugging Lily, "I need to explain about Columbus, about everything." "Not now," Ted interrupted him. "You were being manipulated just like all of us. The important thing is that we're all here." "But there's one thing we need to resolve," Jim interjected. "The situation of the company. Even with Carl arrested, the financial problems remain." "The company doesn't matter," Ted replied, surprising everyone. "I can start from scratch. I've done it before." "You won't need to," Mrs. Betty smiled, taking more documents from her folder. "Look at this. Records of all the fraudulent transactions that Frank made under Carl's orders. With this, we can reverse everything, and there's more. Proof that the investors were Carl's straw men. The money was never theirs." "How did you get all this?" Irene asked, amazed. "An old lady who serves coffee is practically invisible." Mrs. Betty winked. "No one notices when she's around, listening to everything, seeing everything, and I had a debt to this family. It was Mr. Anthony who paid for my grandson's treatment when he was sick, remember?" Ted was about to answer when he noticed something. Mary had gotten up and was walking hesitantly towards Lily. Can I sit with you?" she asked timidly. Lily flashed a huge smile, moving over on the bed to make room. Sure. Do you want to meet Freddie? He's my best friend. The two girls began a whispered conversation about the teddy bear, creating their own private world in that hospital room. Naomi and Junior watched hand in hand, beginning their own journey of reconnection and healing. I'll prepare the documents to reverse everything, Jim announced, getting up, and also for other legal issues that we need to resolve. What issues? Ted asked. Well, the lawyer smiled. We have a family to officially reunite, don't we? Guardianship documents to update, certificates to regularize. And there's the wedding, Mrs. Betty added with a mischievous smile. Wedding? Everyone asked in unison. Oh, don't tell me you didn't notice. The way our Jim looks at Naomi since he met her at the hospital. The lawyer turned red as a beet, while Naomi lowered her eyes, a slight blush tinting her cheeks. Junior surprisingly smiled. If he makes you happy, he said to his ex-wife, I'll be happy too. I just want to be able to be a part of our daughter's life. Always, Naomi replied softly. Lily needs her father. On the other side of the room, oblivious to the adults' conversation, Mary and Lily had fallen asleep together on the hospital bed, Freddie squeezed between them. It was an image that summed it all up. Two girls who had suffered so much, finally finding comfort in each other. Ted and Irene watched the scene embraced, their own wounds beginning to heal. The sun was already high in the Harmony Creek sky, promising a hot day as always. But for the first time in a long time, the heat didn't seem stifling. It was welcoming, like a long-awaited hug. You know, Irene murmured to her husband, I think we need a bigger house now. Ted smiled, kissing her forehead softly. Yes, we do. And this time, we're going to fill it with all the memories we lost in those 7 years. What they didn't know was that even with Carl arrested and the families reunited, there was still one last secret to be revealed. A secret that would, once again, change the lives of everyone in that room. 3 days had passed since the events at the warehouse. The Anthony mansion, which for years had remained silent like a mausoleum of lost memories, now overflowed with life. Irene had insisted that everyone stay there while things settled down. Naomi was still recovering. Junior needed medical follow-up for his headaches, and no one wanted the girls to separate so soon. That Sunday morning, Ted watched from the porch as the two girls played in the garden. Lily ran barefoot through the grass, chased by Mary, who was gradually rediscovering the child she was forced to hide for so long. The sound of their laughter was like music to his ears. It's still hard to believe, isn't it? Irene approached, offering a cup of coffee to her husband. It feels like we're going to wake up any moment and find out it was all a dream. Before Ted could answer, Mrs. Betty appeared on the porch, carrying her inseparable folder of documents. Even on the weekend, the dedicated secretary didn't rest. Sorry to interrupt, she said, her normally serene face marked by concern, but I found something that you need to see. Jim, who was sitting in an armchair reading the newspaper, got up immediately. In recent days, he had barely left the mansion, always present to resolve any legal issue that arose, although everyone suspected that his true interest was more related to a certain single mother than legal matters. What did you find, Betty? The lawyer asked, adjusting his glasses. The lady took a brown envelope from the folder, her hands trembling slightly. I was organizing the documents seized from Carl's office when I found this. It's about Lily's biological family. Naomi, who had just entered the porch bringing a pitcher of juice for the girls, froze. What do you mean, biological family? According to these documents, Mrs. Betty continued, hesitant, Junior is not Lily's biological father. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. In the garden, oblivious to the tension that was building, the girls continued their game. This is impossible, Naomi whispered. leaving the picture on a table. I have always been faithful to Junior. The documents show that there was a switch at the maternity ward, Jim explained, examining the papers. Apparently, Carl organized everything. Your real daughter, he hesitated, looking at Naomi with compassion, did not survive childbirth. No, Naomi staggered, being supported by Jim. It can't be true. There's more, Mrs. Betty continued, her voice trembling. Lily, she's the daughter of a young woman who passed away in childbirth. The father, she looked at Ted, was your brother, Rick. Ted felt the world spin. Rick, his younger brother, had disappeared 7 years ago, shortly before Mary's disappearance. Everyone thought that he had fled the country because of debts. Carl planned everything, Jim explained, reading the documents. He found out about the pregnancy, about how your brother planned to tell the family everything. So, he orchestrated Rick's disappearance, hid the young woman's pregnancy, and when the baby was born, he placed her with Naomi and Junior, Ted completed, his voice hoarse, to have another way to control us, to hurt us when he wanted. Lily is my niece. Ted's voice was barely a whisper. At that moment, a sound of breaking glass made everyone turn around. Junior was standing at the door to the porch, shards of a water glass scattered at his feet. I heard everything, he said, his face pale. That explains why Carl had so much power over me. He threatened to tell the truth, said that Naomi would never forgive me. But I didn't know. Naomi protested, tears streaming down her face. I swear I didn't know anything. In the garden, the laughter stopped. Lily and Mary watched the scene on the porch with worried expressions. Mommy, Lily called, her little voice full of concern. Why are you crying? Naomi tried to wipe away the tears quickly, but it was too late. The two girls were already climbing the steps of the porch, Lily still holding Freddie tightly. It's nothing, honey, Naomi tried to smile. Adult stuff. But Lily, with that sharp perception that some children have, looked around, catching the tension in the air. Her honey-colored eyes, the same eyes as Rick, Ted now realized, landed on each adult face. It's about me, isn't it? She asked simply. You found out something about me. Mary instinctively held the younger girl's hand. In the few days they had known each other, a deep bond had formed between them. A bond that, ironically, was truly of blood. Lily, Ted knelt in front of the girl. Sometimes life is complicated. Sometimes we find out things that... I'm not Junior's daughter, am I? She asked, surprising everyone with her insight. The silence that followed was her answer. Junior took a step forward, tears streaming down his scarred face. Lily, he said, his voice choked. It doesn't matter what those papers say. You are my daughter. I carried you, saw you take your first steps, loved you from the first moment. But what about Mommy? Lily asked, her big eyes full of tears. Aren't you my real mom either? I breastfed you. Naomi knelt beside her daughter, sobbing. Rocked you on feverish nights, cried when you cried, smiled when you smiled. You are my daughter, Lily. In the heart, which is where it matters most. And you know what? Ted interjected softly. We found out that you're very special. You're my niece, my brother Rick's, our daughter. So, Lily looked at Mary. You really are my real cousin. Mary smiled through tears. Yes, really. That's why we got along so well from the beginning. Lily was silent for a moment, processing all of this in the way that a 6-year-old could process. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. You mean I have even more family now? I have my dad Junior, my mom Naomi, and I also have Uncle Ted, Aunt Irene, and Mary is my cousin. The simplicity of her childish logic broke the tension in the air. Naomi and Junior hugged her simultaneously, while the others watched with teary eyes. And there's one more thing, Jim cleared his throat, cleaning his glasses for the 10th time. If If your mother allows it, I would like to be a part of this family too." Naomi looked at him, surprised, then at Junior, who nodded slightly. "Is Uncle Jim going to be my dad too?" Lily asked innocently, making everyone laugh amidst the tears. "That," Mrs. Betty declared, putting away the documents, "we'll resolve calmly, one thing at a time." But there was more revelation on the way. While everyone recovered from the initial shock, Regina, Irene's sister, arrived at the mansion carrying an old box. "I found this in the attic of our parents' house," she announced, placing the box on the table on the porch. "They're letters from Rick. The last one is from a few days before he disappeared." Ted took the letters with trembling hands. The last revelation was yet to come, and it would forever change the understanding of everything that had happened in the last 7 years. In the garden, a blue butterfly landed on Lily's shoulder, making the girl laugh. That crystal sound, so full of innocent joy, was living proof that sometimes families are formed not by blood, but by love, and that some bonds, even when tested by the harshest revelations, only become stronger. The afternoon sun was setting when Ted finally found the courage to open Rick's last letter. The mansion's porch was silent now. Naomi had taken the girls to take a bath while Junior rested in the guest room, still struggling with headaches. Irene sat beside her husband, holding his hand as he unfolded the paper yellowed by time. Rick's handwriting, always so firm and determined, showed signs of haste and agitation in that last letter. The words seemed to dance on the paper, as if they had been written in a moment of great turmoil. "Dear brother, when you read this letter, it is possible that I am no longer here. I have discovered something terrible about Carl, something that goes far beyond the embezzlement that you found. He is not only corrupt, he is a monster. Remember Amanda, the young architect who started working at his office? We fell in love, Ted. It was fast, intense, and we kept it a secret because she was afraid of losing her job. Now she is pregnant, and we have discovered that Carl has a much larger scheme than we imagined. He doesn't just steal public money, he steals lives. I found records of other pregnant women who worked for him, women who supposedly lost their babies or disappeared mysteriously. He has connections in hospitals, in registry offices. It's a network of corruption that involves baby trafficking. Amanda discovered everything by accident when she was organizing some old files. Now she is in hiding, and I need to go find her. I left all the evidence I could gather in a safe place, in the old St. Joseph pottery warehouse, behind the loose panel on the south wall. If something happens to me, look for them, and more importantly, protect our baby. Amanda is in her 8th month, and I'm afraid of what Carl may do when he finds out. He's done it before, Ted. He steals babies, falsifies documents, destroys families. I know it sounds crazy, but it's all true. And there's more. I think he's planning something against you, too. I heard him talking on the phone about your daughter, about how it would be poetic to make you feel in your skin what it's like to lose someone. Forgive me for not telling you before about Amanda, about the baby. I wanted to wait for the right moment. I wanted to be sure that we could protect them. Now it may be too late. If you are reading this, probably something went wrong. But don't give up, brother. Find the evidence. Protect my daughter. And above all, be careful with Carl. He has eyes and ears everywhere. With love, Rick. Ted let the letter fall, his hands trembling uncontrollably. Irene sobbed beside him, while Mrs. Betty and Jim exchanged heavy glances. The warehouse, Ted murmured. We need to go back to the warehouse now. I've already taken care of that, Regina interjected, surprising everyone. Irene's sister took a folder from her bag. After I found the letters, I went there. The panel was exactly where Rick described. And I found this. The folder was filled with photographs, documents, and detailed records of Carl's scheme. There was also a diary, Amanda's diary, with her last entries dating from a few days before Lily was born. "My God," Jim murmured, examining the papers. "This is much bigger than we imagined. Carl didn't act alone. There were doctors involved, registry office employees, even Frank," Mrs. Betty completed. "He didn't start working for Carl by chance. He was planted in your company from the beginning." At that moment, a sound of small footsteps made everyone turn around. Lily was standing at the door to the porch, still with her hair wet from the bath, Freddie firmly hugged against her chest. "Uncle Ted," she called softly, "Mom Naomi is crying in the room. She found an old picture in a drawer." Ted got up immediately, following Lily to the guest room. Naomi was sitting on the bed, holding a crumpled photograph. Mary was beside her, a protective arm around the woman's shoulders. "I remember her," Naomi sobbed, showing the photo. "Amanda. She went to do prenatal care at the same hospital as me. We talked several times in the waiting room." The photo showed a beautiful young woman, with the same honey-colored eyes as Lily, smiling next to Rick. On the back of the photo, a date and a message. "First ultrasound. It's a girl." "On the day of the birth," Naomi continued, her voice choked, "they said that my baby, that she hadn't survived. I was so sedated, so confused. When they brought me Lily, they said she was my daughter, that I must be confused because of the medications." "They switched the babies," Jim concluded. Examining the documents, the biological daughter of Naomi and Junior was reported as stillborn, while Lily, the daughter of Rick and Amanda, was placed with them so that Carl could control them later, Ted completed, the anger growing in his voice. "And when Rick found out everything, the accident in Columbus," Junior spoke from the door, where he was leaning with an expression of pain. "It wasn't an accident. Carl sent someone to chase me, cause the crash. But I wasn't the main target. It was Rick," Irene whispered. "Carl found out that he was investigating, that he knew everything." Lily, who had listened to everything in silence, approached the photo that Naomi was holding. She touched Amanda's face with her delicate little fingers. "She was pretty," she said simply. "She looked like an angel." "Yes, she was," Ted replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. "And you have her eyes, the same eyes as your father, Rick." "But can I still call Dad Junior Dad?" Lily asked, her little voice full of concern. "And is Mom Naomi still my mom?" "Of course, my love." Naomi hugged her tight. "Nothing will change that, never. And now you have even more family," Mary added, joining the hug. "You have 2 dads, a mom, uncles, a cousin, and a future stepfather," Jim completed from the door, making Naomi blush. But the night of revelations was not yet over. Regina returned to the porch, holding her cell phone with trembling hands. "I just received a call," she announced, "from the penitentiary where Carl is. He wants to make a full confession." "Why?" Ted asked, suspicious. "Why now?" "Because," Regina hesitated, "he is very ill, and he said that there is one more thing we need to know, something about another child." The silence that followed was deafening. In Naomi's lap, Lily hugged Freddie tighter, as if the teddy bear could protect her from the painful truths that were still to come. "I'm going there," Ted declared, getting up. "I need to look him in the eyes one last time. I need to know the whole truth." "I'm going with you," Irene said firmly. "No more secrets between us." As the couple prepared to leave, Lily ran to Ted, extending Freddie to him. "Take him with you, Uncle," she said solemnly. "Freddie has always protected me. Now he will protect you, too." Ted took the battered bear, feeling tears burn his eyes. Somehow, that innocent gesture carried more strength than all the discoveries of the night. What would they find at the penitentiary? What would be Carl's last revelation? And more importantly, how would all these truths affect the future that they were beginning to rebuild? The night was just beginning in Harmony Creek, and with it, another chapter of this story of pain, redemption, and above all, the transformative power of true love was about to unfold. The state penitentiary was on the outskirts of Harmony Creek, a grey concrete complex that looked even gloomier under the night sky. Ted held Freddie tightly as he walked through the cold corridors beside Irene, following a guard who was leading them to the infirmary. The battered teddy bear, a gift from Lily, provided a strange comfort in that hostile environment. Jim accompanied them a few steps behind, a folder full of documents under his arm. The lawyer had insisted on coming. "We need an official witness for any confession," he had argued. But Ted suspected that the real reason was more personal. After so many years defending the Anthony family, Jim wanted to see the outcome of this story with his own eyes. When they arrived at the infirmary, they found Carl in a hospital bed, connected to heart monitors. The man who once emanated power and arrogance now looked small and frail, his yellowish skin and sunken eyes evidencing the severity of his condition. "You brought the bear," Carl commented in a hoarse voice, noticing Freddie in Ted's hands. "Lily must trust you a lot to lend her protector." "How do you know about Freddie?" Ted asked, tensing immediately. A faint smile crossed Carl's face. "I know much more than you imagine, Ted. For example, I know that this bear did not originally belong to Lily. It belonged to another girl." Irene squeezed her husband's hand tightly while Jim approached, tape recorder in hand. "What are you talking about?" Ted demanded. "Sit down." Carl indicated the chairs next to the bed. "It's a long story and I don't have much time." When everyone was seated, Carl closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When he reopened them, there was something different in them. Perhaps remorse, perhaps just the weight of the secrets he carried. "It all started much earlier than you. Imagine," he began, "before Rick, before Amanda, even before Mary. It started with Susan." "Susan?" Irene asked, the name sounding vaguely familiar. "My sister," Carl replied, his voice trembling slightly. "She worked at the town hospital 20 years ago. She was the one who discovered the baby switching scheme. But instead of reporting it," he coughed, a harsh and painful sound, "she saw an opportunity." "You're saying you didn't start this?" Jim asked, incredulity in his voice. "Susan created the network. I just expanded it." Carl paused to catch his breath. She had connections in the hospital, knew people in registry offices. At first, they were just isolated cases. Babies of single mothers given to rich families in exchange for money, but then what? Ted pressed. "Susan got pregnant. The father was a married doctor, an influential man who didn't want a scandal. She planned to give the baby up for adoption, using her own contacts. But there were complications during childbirth. Susan didn't survive." Tears streamed down Carl's face now, surprising everyone. "I promised her on her deathbed that I would take care of her daughter, but the doctor, he wanted the child, threatened to expose the whole scheme if I didn't hand the baby over to him." "And you handed her over?" Irene whispered. "Yes, and I spent the following years building power and influence, taking control of the network that Susan created. It wasn't just for money. I wanted to find my niece one day." "And did you find her?" Ted asked, although something in his heart already knew the answer. Carl looked directly at Irene. "Your sister Regina is not your biological sister, Irene. She is my niece." The shock of the revelation made Irene stagger in her chair. "Impossible. Regina is only 2 years younger than me." "The documents were altered," Carl explained. "Regina is actually 5 years younger. Your parents, they were patients of the doctor. They couldn't have children. It was one of Susan's first arrangements." Ted held Irene, who was trembling violently. "Why are you telling us this now?" Because Regina found out the truth, Carly replied. She was the one who found the documents in the warehouse, wasn't she? Rick's letters led her there, but she found much more, found the complete story. That's why she insisted on coming with us today, Jim murmured. She already knew. But that doesn't explain your obsession with destroying our family, Ted argued. Why Mary? Why Rick? Carl coughed again, harder this time. A nurse entered to check his vital signs, but he dismissed him with a gesture. Because you were the perfect example of what I hated most, a happy family built on values that I despised. When I discovered the irregularities in your company, I thought I had finally found your flaw. But no, you were honest even in that. You were the one who discovered the corruption, you who reported it. And you decided to take revenge through Mary, Irene concluded, her voice full of pain. It was more than revenge, Carl continued. When Rick started dating Amanda, when he found out about the baby, he also started investigating, got dangerously close to discovering everything, not just about the current scheme, but about the past, about Susan, about Regina. So you silenced him, Ted completed, the anger growing in his voice. And I used your daughter as collateral, Carl admitted. The plan was to keep her away for just a few months, use it to force you to sell the company. But then, something changed. What? Mary became attached to the family that took her in, a family that really loved her, that gave her everything. I could never give Susan's daughter, and I couldn't undo it. Where was she all this time? Irene asked, tears streaming down her face. At the boarding school in Columbus, as you discovered. But on weekends, she stayed with the family. A family that didn't know anything, that believed they were just helping an orphan child. At that moment, the door to the infirmary opened. Regina entered, her face marked by contained tears. I knew, she said softly. Always knew there was something different. The way Mom and Dad treated me, the conflicting documents I found over the years. But I never imagined... Regina, Irene stood up, staggering. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to be sure, Regina replied, approaching Carl's bed. Needed to hear it from him, and needed you to hear it too. Carl looked at his niece, with a mixture of pride and sadness. You are just like your mother. Susan was just as determined. But there's still one thing you haven't told us, Regina pressed. About Freddie. Everyone looked at the teddy bear that Ted was still holding. Carl sighed deeply. The bear belonged to Mary, he confessed. When I took her, she refused to let go of the toy. So I promised that I would keep it until she came back. Years later, when I found Lily and Naomi, when I learned that the girl was Rick's daughter, it seemed appropriate that she had it. You gave Mary's bear to Lily? Ted asked, perplexed. I put it in the box of donations that arrived at the camp where they lived, Carl explained. I knew Lily would choose it. Her eyes are the same as Amanda's, the same as Rick's. The heart monitor began to emit slower, worrying beeps. The nurse entered again, this time more insistent. I need to examine the patient, he declared. You will have to leave. Wait, Carl called, his voice increasingly weak. There's one. Last thing. In my office, behind Susan's portrait, there's a letter. For Regina. And... he coughed violently. Documents. About the family that took care of Mary on weekends. They deserve to know the truth too. As they were led out of the infirmary, Ted looked at Freddie with different eyes. The battered bear wasn't just a toy. It was a link between past and present, between loss and redemption. Regina hugged Irene in the hallway, years of secrets and guilt dissolving into shared tears. Jim put away the tape recorder, his professional expression barely disguising the emotion of the moment. But something still bothered Ted. There was more to the story. He could feel it. Something in Carl's eyes, something in his last words. What would they find in the office? What secrets would that letter to Regina reveal? And more importantly, how would all these truths affect the delicate balance that their families were beginning to build? The night was far from over, and dawn promised to bring even more revelations that would forever change the fate of all involved in this plot of secrets, pain, and redemption. Carl's office remained exactly as he had left it. On the night of his arrest, the imposing mahogany desk, the bookshelves that reached the ceiling, the air of power and privilege that emanated from every carefully chosen object. Everything seemed to freeze time in that space. The morning light entered lazily through the large windows, illuminating particles of dust that danced in the air. Regina was the first to enter, her hesitant steps echoing on the marble floor. Behind her, Ted, Irene, and Jim watched in silence as she approached the painting mentioned by Carl, an oil portrait of a young and beautiful woman with the same penetrating eyes as Regina. "Susan," Regina murmured, touching the golden frame with trembling fingers. "My real mother." Carefully she removed the painting from the wall, revealing a built-in safe. The combination was written on a small piece of paper glued to the back of the painting, a last act of trust from Carl. Inside the safe, in addition to documents and folders, there was a carved wooden box with the name Susan engraved on the lid. Regina opened it with reverence, finding a letter addressed to her and an old diary. Do you want me to read it aloud?" she asked, her voice trembling. Everyone nodded, sitting in the leather armchairs in the office. Regina took a deep breath and began to read. "My dear Regina, if you are reading this letter, it means that Carl has finally found the courage to tell the truth. Or perhaps fate has forced his hand. My brother has always been too stubborn to do the right thing willingly. I am Susan, your biological mother. And this is the story you deserve to know, the story that shaped not only your life, but the lives of so many others. I started working at the town hospital very young, full of dreams and ideals. It was there that I met your father, Dr. Albert Kane, one of the most respected surgeons in Ohio. He was married, much older, but our love was inevitable and overwhelming. When I discovered that I was pregnant, I also discovered something terrible. A baby-switching scheme at the hospital. Doctors, nurses, registry office employees, all involved in a shady business of illegal adoptions. Instead of reporting it, I saw an opportunity. I thought I could use that system to guarantee a better future for you. Dr. Kane wanted me to have a procedure to terminate the pregnancy, but I refused. Instead, I proposed to take control of the scheme, transform it into something different. At first, it was just to help mothers in vulnerable situations, connect them with families who could offer a better life for their babies. But power corrupts, my daughter. Soon, money started to speak louder. The choices became more difficult, the justifications more elaborate. When you were born, there were complications. I knew I wouldn't survive the childbirth. Dr. Kane, your father, panicked. He couldn't take on an illegitimate daughter. His marriage, his reputation, everything would be ruined. Carl promised to help me, swore he would take care of you. But fear and greed spoke louder. He allowed Dr. Kane to hand you over to the Moore family, your adoptive parents, in exchange for his silence about the entire scheme. What Carl didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had a contingency plan. This diary contains all the details of the scheme, every child, every family, every transaction. I kept records of everything, including evidence against all those involved. But more important than that, there is a bank fund in your name. All the money I received from these transactions, I saved. Not for me, not for Carl, but for you, so that one day you could do the right thing. The money is there, untouched, growing for over 30 years. Use it to help these families, Regina. Use it to fix what I helped to break. And there's one more thing you need to know about Mary, about the family that took her in on weekends. They weren't chosen at random. The woman, Mrs. Connie, was my best friend at the hospital. The only one who knew the whole truth about you, about me. She promised to take care of Mary as if she were her own granddaughter, give her the love that I couldn't give you. And she fulfilled that promise, even without knowing the girl's true identity. Look for her, my daughter. Connie still lives at 237 Oak Street. She deserves to know the truth, and Mary deserves to meet the woman who was her second grandmother during all these years. I know it's a lot to process. I know that maybe you hate me for my choices, for allowing all of this to happen. But know that every beat of my heart until the last moment was of love for you. Forgive Carl, if you can. He is a broken man who transformed guilt and remorse into senseless revenge. Forgive your adoptive parents. They really love you, even if they built that family on lies. And mainly, forgive yourself for any anger or resentment you may feel. You are not defined by my mistakes or by Carl's secrets. You are your own person, strong and upright as I always dreamed you would be. With all my love, even beyond life, Susan, your mother. Regina let the letter fall into her lap, silent tears streaming down her face. Irene immediately got up to hug her, years of familial connection overcoming the recent revelations. There's more in the safe, Jim noticed, approaching carefully. Among the folders and documents, there was a brown envelope with the name Moore Family on it. Inside, dozens of photographs. Mary smiling on a swing, eating ice cream with a grey-haired lady sleeping on a flowered sofa hugged to Freddie, the same bear that now belonged to Lily. She was so close, Ted murmured, his voice choked. All this time on weekends, she was just a few streets away. And Mrs. Connie, Irene added, recognizing the lady in the photos. She sells flowers in the town square. We've passed her hundreds of times without knowing. Regina was flipping through Susan's diary with trembling hands. Everything is here. Names, dates, values. Dozens of children, hundreds of families affected. What are we going to do? Jim asked, his professional tone barely disguising the emotion. We're going to do what Susan wanted, Regina replied, wiping away the tears. We're going to fix what we can. Every family deserves to know the truth, deserves the chance at healing that we're having. But first, Ted said, taking the photos of Mary with Mrs. Connie, we need to pay a visit to Oak Street. At that moment, Irene's phone rang. It was Naomi, her voice urgent. You need to come home now. Lily has a high fever, calling for Freddie. And Mary, she remembered something. Something about a lady who made cinnamon cookies on weekends. The sun was already high in the Harmony Creek sky, promising another hot day. But inside Carl's office, time seemed suspended between past and present, between secrets revealed and truths yet to be discovered. Regina carefully put Susan's letter and the diary back in the wooden box. Those pages contained not only the story of her origin, but the map to redeem decades of pain and separation. As they left the office, Ted looked one last time at Susan's portrait. In the eyes of the woman in the painting, he saw not only Regina's mother, but all the mothers who had their stories altered by the scheme that she initiated, including Naomi, Amanda, and so many others. The next chapter of this story was about to begin, and with it, the chance to finally transform decades of pain into possibilities for healing and redemption. The Anthony mansion was plunged into tense silence when Ted, Irene, and Regina arrived. Jim had gone straight to his office with the documents found, promising to immediately begin the legal process to help all the families affected by the scheme. In the guest room, they found Lily burning with fever, her normally cheerful little face contorted into an expression of discomfort. Naomi was passing cold compresses on her forehead, while Mary held her small hand, softly singing a song that seemed strangely familiar. Cinnamon cookies, Grandma's smell. The soft melody made Irene freeze at the door. It was the same song that Mrs. Connie sang while baking cookies on weekends. She won't stop calling for Freddie, Naomi explained, her voice exhausted. And there's something else. She keeps mentioning a white-haired lady, saying that she needs to return something. Ted approached the bed, still holding the battered teddy bear. Seeing Freddie, Lily opened her feverish eyes, stretching out her trembling hands. He missed her, the girl murmured, delirious. The flower lady said he missed the other girl. What lady, honey? Naomi asked softly. The one who sells flowers in the square, Lily replied, hugging Freddie. She always gives me a flower when she passes by. Said I looked like someone she knew. Mary, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, let out a small sigh of recognition. Grandma Connie, she whispered. That's what I called her on weekends. She made cinnamon cookies and let me help water the flowers. You remember her? Ted asked gently, sitting next to his daughter. They're coming back little by little, the memories, Mary explained, silent tears streaming down her face. When Lily started singing the cookie song in her fever, it was like a door opened in my mind. Regina, who was watching the scene from the door, held tightly to the box with Susan's diary. We need to go there, she declared. Mrs. Connie deserves to know the truth, and maybe she can help us better understand everything that happened. But Lily has a fever, Naomi protested. The doctor is already on his way, Junior informed, entering the room. He still moved carefully, the headaches a constant reminder of the trauma he had suffered. Mrs. Betty called him as soon as the fever started. At that moment, Lily sat up in bed abruptly, her honey-colored eyes shining with a clarity that contrasted with her feverish state. Freddie wants to go, she declared with surprising certainty. He needs to visit his first home. The simplicity of the statement struck everyone as a revelation. The teddy bear wasn't just a toy, it was a living link between past and present, between Mary and Lily, between all the lives affected by decades of secrets. I'm going with you, Mary declared, getting up. I need to see that house again. I want to go too. Lily tried to get out of bed, but was gently restrained by Naomi. Not today, my love, her mother whispered. You need to get better first. But I promise that as soon as the fever passes, we'll all go together to visit the flower lady. The doctor arrived soon after, Dr. Miller, a gray-haired gentleman who had been treating the Anthony family for years. After examining Lily, he smiled reassuringly. It's just a virus, he explained. With the medication I'm going to prescribe, the fever should subside in a few hours, but she needs to rest. Well, the doctor prepared the prescription. Ted, Irene, Regina, and Mary prepared to leave. Lily, already calmer with the antipyretic that the doctor had applied, held Freddie tightly. Tell the flower lady everything, she asked sleepily. Tell her I took good care of him. In the car, on the way to Oak Street, a heavy silence filled the air. Mary held one of the photos found in Carl's office. In it, a younger version of herself smiled next to Mrs. Connie, both covered in cookie flour. She never stopped looking for you, Regina commented softly, showing a page from Susan's diary. It says here that even after Carl forbade your visits, she continued going to the square every day, selling flowers, hoping to see you pass by. Oak Street was a quiet street in Harmony Creek's old downtown, with well-preserved old houses and leafy trees providing shade on the sidewalks. Number 237 was a yellow house with a lush garden. Roses, daisies, and of course oak trees bloomed in well-kept flower beds. Before they could ring the doorbell, the door opened. Mrs. Connie was there, as if she were expecting them. Her hair, now completely white, framed a face marked by time, but still full of kindness. Her eyes immediately fixed on Mary. I knew that one day you would come back, my little one, she said, her voice choked. Come in, the cinnamon cookies just came out of the oven. The kitchen of the house was exactly as Mary remembered. The lace curtains on the windows, the wallpaper, with small flowers, the unmistakable smell of cinnamon and love in the air. On the table, a tray of freshly baked cookies awaited, as if Mrs. Connie had really foreseen that visit. "Susan told me everything before she passed," the lady revealed while serving tea in delicate cups. "About the scheme, about Regina, about how Carl turned something already wrong into something even worse. She made me promise that I would take care of any child who needed love. And then you arrived, Mary. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" Ted asked, his voice more curious than accusatory. "Because Susan also made me promise something else," Mrs. Connie replied, taking a yellowed envelope from an old cookie tin. "She said that the truth could only come to light when all the pieces were in place, when love was stronger than revenge." The envelope contained a last letter from Susan, dated on the day of her death. In it, there was not only the confirmation of everything they already knew, but also a final revelation that no one expected, a truth that would forever change the understanding of everything that had happened. While Regina prepared to read Susan's last message, the afternoon sun painted golden shadows on the walls of the cozy kitchen. In the garden, the oak trees swayed gently with the breeze, their yellow flowers dancing like small earthly stars. Somewhere in the town, a girl with honey-colored eyes slept, hugging a battered teddy bear, dreaming of cinnamon cookies and stories that were beginning to find their true ending. But the greatest secret was still to come, guarded in the yellowed pages of that last letter, a secret that would prove that sometimes fate weaves its plots with threads much more delicate and complex than we can imagine. The silence in Mrs. Connie's kitchen was almost palpable as Regina unfolded Susan's last letter with trembling hands. The smell of cinnamon cookies lingered in the air like a living memory, while the afternoon sun turned everything to gold through the lace curtains. "Dearest," Regina began to read, her voice choked, "if this letter is being read, it means that the moment I have so long awaited has finally arrived. The moment when truth can be greater than revenge, when love can heal the wounds that I helped to create." Mary held Irene's hand tightly, while Ted remained standing by the window, observing the garden where so many memories of his daughter had been built without his knowledge. "What I'm about to reveal," Regina continued reading, "will forever change the understanding of everything that has happened. I am not writing this to seek forgiveness. Some mistakes are too great to be forgiven. I write because you deserve to know the whole truth." Mrs. Connie served more tea, her experienced hands trembling slightly as she filled the old porcelain cups. "It all started much earlier than you imagine. Before Regina, before the baby scheme, even before I met Dr. Kane. It started with a young nurse who made a terrible mistake, me allowing a newborn baby to be reported as stillborn to her family, while in fact she was delivered to a wealthy couple who couldn't have children. That baby," Regina paused, her voice failing, "was Amanda." The shock of the revelation made Ted stagger. Amanda, Rick's girlfriend, Lily's mother, was one of the first victims of the scheme. "I spent years carrying that guilt," the letter continued. "I watched from afar as Amanda grew up, transforming into a brilliant and determined young woman. When she started working at Carl's office, I understood that fate was weaving a plot much larger than I could imagine. It was then that Rick entered her life, Ted's brother, as upright and honest as him. When I discovered that Amanda was pregnant, I realized that I had a chance to fix at least part of the harm I had caused." Irene sobbed softly, understanding where that revelation would lead them. Mary squeezed her hand tighter. "But Carl found out everything, not only about Amanda and Rick, but about my participation in the original scheme. He saw an opportunity to use that information for his own purposes. That's when everything started to crumble. Carl's original plan," Regina continued reading, her voice trembling, "was to use Mary only as a way to pressure Ted. But when he found out about Amanda, about her true origin, he saw the chance for a much more elaborate revenge. The baby," Who was born stillborn in Naomi's delivery? It was the daughter of one of the nurses involved in the scheme. Carl used that tragedy to create a web of manipulation that would affect all the families involved. He placed Lily, the daughter of Amanda, and Rick with Naomi and Junior. He kept Mary under his influence through Mrs. Connie, the only person I truly trusted. Mrs. Connie wiped away a silent tear, nodding in confirmation. But there's something more, the letter continued. Something that not even Carl knew. Amanda was not just another baby switched at the maternity ward. She was the daughter of Margaret Kane, the wife of Dr. Albert Kane, the baby she thought she had lost in childbirth. Regina let the letter fall, her hands trembling too much to continue holding the paper. Ted picked it up, continuing the reading. That means that Amanda was Regina's half-sister, that Lily is not only Ted's niece, she's also Regina's niece, that all these families, separated by lies and manipulations, have actually always been connected by blood ties that no one knew. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of the bells from the Harmony Creek Town Church, announcing the end of the afternoon. There's more. Ted continued reading, his voice hoarse with emotion. In the false bottom of this cookie tin, Connie keeps all the documents that prove this truth. Original certificates, DNA tests that I had done secretly, photos that document the whole story. Mrs. Connie rose slowly, taking the old cookie tin. With skilled fingers, she removed the false bottom, revealing a folder filled with yellowed documents. There is also something else in this tin, the letter continued. A will. All the money I accumulated over the years, not only from the baby scheme, but also my family inheritance, is divided equally among all the affected families. It's a considerable fortune, kept in secret accounts in various banks. I know that money cannot fix what has been broken. It cannot return the lost years, the stolen memories, the broken ties. But it can help to build a new future. It can give these families a chance to start over, to create new memories. And to Connie, my faithful friend, I leave this house and the garden that she loves so much. Continue being the safe harbor that she has always been, the place where children can find love and cinnamon cookies, where families can reconnect and heal. At that moment, Ted's phone rang. It was Naomi. Lily's fever had subsided, and the girl was asking when she could visit the flower lady. Bring her, Mrs. Connie said softly, already getting up to prepare a new batch of cookies. It's time for all the pieces to finally fit together. An hour later, the cozy kitchen was full. Lily, still a little pale but with bright eyes, sat in Naomi's lap, while Junior and Jim talked quietly about the legal aspects of everything they had discovered. Mary had assumed her natural place next to the oven, helping Mrs. Connie prepare more cookies, as if the 7 years of separation had never existed. Regina watched the scene with tears in her eyes, finally understanding the true meaning of family. "You know," Lily said suddenly, her childish voice full of a wisdom beyond her years, "Freddie knew all along. That's why he wanted to come here so much." The battered teddy bear rested in the center of the table, like a silent witness to the whole story. Through him, 2 girls separated by fate had connected, 2 families divided had reunited, and secrets buried for decades finally came to light. "What will we do now?" Irene asked, breaking the contemplative silence that had settled in. "Now," Ted replied, putting his arm around her, "we start building new memories, true memories, based on love and honesty." "And cinnamon cookies," Lily added seriously, making everyone laugh. Mrs. Connie smiled, taking a new batch out of the oven. The sweet and welcoming smell filled the kitchen, mixing with the fragrance of the flowers from the garden that entered through the window. "Susan always said," she commented, distributing the still warm cookies, "that some recipes are passed down from generation to generation, not only for the taste, but for the love they carry. I think families are like that too. In the garden, the oak trees continued their gentle dance with the afternoon breeze. The sun, almost setting, painted the Harmony Creek sky with shades of pink and gold, as if nature itself was celebrating. That moment of reconnection and healing. Lily fell asleep in Naomi's arms, a serene smile on her little face. Mary sat next to them, unconsciously assuming a protective position in relation to her newfound cousin. Regina carefully guarded the documents that told the true story of her origin, while Jim made notes about the next legal steps. And in the center of everything, Freddie watched the scene with his button eyes, silent guardian of a story that began with pain and secrets, but ended with love and redemption. Family, Mrs. Connie said softly, serving another round of tea, is not just a matter of blood or documents. It's about daily choices of love, about forgiveness, about the courage to rebuild what has been broken. The church bell rang again, marking the end of one day and the beginning of a new era for all those lives intertwined by fate. In the cozy kitchen of the yellow house on Oak Street, between the aroma of freshly baked cookies and the fragrance of the flowers from the garden, old wounds began to heal and new stories began to be written. Because sometimes the real miracle is not in never having been broken, but in how we choose to rebuild what has been broken. And on that golden afternoon, in Harmony Creek, between cinnamon cookies and tears of joy, several families finally found their way back home. "Uncle, I got a feast today." Millionaire shocked to see this 4-year-old homeless girl eating a fried frog. 30 minutes later, he takes her to the most expensive restaurant in town and says something incredible. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scorching July sun beat down on downtown Harmony Creek when Ted Anthony parked his black Cadillac in front of the vacant lot on Elm Street. At 54, the businessman was used to the Ohio heat, but something about that afternoon made his heart clench in a different way. He adjusted his navy blue tie, ran his hand through his graying hair, and got out of the car, eager to check the location where he would build his new hardware store. His Italian loafers sank slightly into the red dirt as he walked across the lot, imagining where the structures of what would be the largest enterprise in the Anthony chain would be located. That's when a sudden movement caught his attention. In the far corner of the lot, near a small thicket, a thin smoke rose in spirals through the stifling air. Ted frowned and walked in that direction, thinking it might be a fire. What he found, however, made his blood run cold. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, was sitting on the ground with a stick in her hand. Her curly hair was dusty, and the pink dress she wore was so dirty that the original color was barely discernible. Beside her, a worn and torn teddy bear served as her only companion. "Uncle, I got a feast today," she exclaimed with an innocent smile, showing her small white teeth in contrast to her dirty face. Over a small fire improvised with twigs, she was roasting something that made Ted's stomach churn, a small frog. "Good heavens," Ted muttered, feeling his legs weaken. "Where are your parents, honey?" "Mommy's sleeping," the little one replied with frightening naturalness. "She hasn't woken up for days, even when I shout real loud." Her honey-colored eyes met Ted's without showing fear, only a resigned acceptance that no child should have. "What do you mean, sleeping, and your dad?" "Daddy left for Columbus a long time ago, said he'd come back rich," she shrugged, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "I'm Lily, and this is Freddie," she introduced, holding up the battered bear. Ted felt the world spinning. The girl's words hit him like a punch to the gut. Without thinking twice, he crouched down beside her. "Lily, can you take me to your mom?" The girl nodded, dropping the stick. "She's in our house." She pointed to a makeshift structure a few yards away, which Ted hadn't noticed before. A kind of tent made of pieces of tarpaulin and cardboard. "My name is Ted," he said softly, extending his hand. Before we go see your mom, how about we eat something real? I know a place nearby with the best food in town. Lily's eyes lit up, but then she frowned. I can't leave Mommy alone. I promise. We'll be back soon to help her, Ted assured, feeling a lump in his throat. Let's fill that tummy with real food first. Lily hesitated for a moment, hugging the bear tightly. Can Freddie come too? Of course he can, Ted smiled, trying to disguise the anguish he felt. He must be hungry too. On the way to the car, Lily held his hand with a trust that frightened him. This girl shouldn't trust strangers so easily, he thought.